Portlanders are beyond frustrated.
My message would be, we have an emergency. Could you please act like we have an emergency?
Drug use, mental health, and homelessness are long past the point of becoming a crisis. And too many parents are burying their children due to gun violence.
This young man took my daughter's life in broad daylight. My baby was snatched out of me.
The city is at a crossroads.
There's a huge problem. Like, everybody's leaving.
The community is ready to step up, and they want to partner with elected officials.
We work with government. We are trying to partner with government, because some of the barriers we run into are government related.
What is the way forward for our city in crisis?
This is not the time for cautious leadership.
Tonight, city and county policymakers, community leaders, and Portlanders will discuss the new pathways that lay before us.
It ain't time to lighten up, it's time to tighten up.
K2's City in Crisis, Problems to Progress Town Hall starts right now. And good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this special K2 Town Hall on progress being made here in the Rose City. Last week, we ran a series of special programs on the problems facing the city and the progress. And tonight, we're talking solutions with community leaders. What still needs to be done? I'm Steve Dunn, joined by Wright Gazaway.
And joining us tonight are guests from across the spectrum when it comes to restoring Portland. We have city, county, and community leaders, along with law enforcement and people who have taken it into their own hands to help their neighborhoods. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler had agreed to be here. We were told weeks ago it was on his schedule. His office canceled yesterday, citing a scheduling conflict. Throughout our series that aired last week, we asked you, do you think Portland is improving? Yes, no, or just starting? Here are the results from the past week, just shy of about 2,000 people weighing in. And you can see overwhelmingly about 72% of people say no, but close to 20% of people say just starting. If you'd like to weigh in at home, scan the QR code on your screen. We'll keep checking back in throughout the show.
We want to begin by asking our guests to answer that same question with a raise of hands. Do you think Portland is improving? Yes or no? Show of hands who think it's improving right now. Let's see that. Okay, we've got a little over half now. Mike Roach, I want to begin with you tonight. For the folks at home, Mike sat in on a round table that I held in the South Portland neighborhood, Lair Hill neighborhood. And you said something during that discussion, Mike, that about the emergency here in the county and the city, and that they just weren't acting like it was an emergency. Tell me about that.
Well, basically, as I look around at what's happening both in our business in Hillsdale, and the business that we live across the street from, Ross Island Grocery and Cafe. The owner, Jennifer Daniluk, is sitting behind me. When I see what's happening at her business, for instance, where for 22 years she had zero criminal activity and she's had 4 incidents in the last year. That tells me something is not right, something is wrong, and especially when it concerns small business owners. Small businesses are struggling to keep their businesses alive just running them as a business. When you have to deal with criminal activity, graffiti, vandalism, break-ins, tip jar being stolen off the counter for the first time in 22 years, you can't operate that way. You have to have a better environment for that, and I don't know how the city's going to create a better environment for small business owners to do our jobs, but somehow we've got to do that. And it's neighborhood livability. If small business owners aren't running their businesses well, it's not a good neighbor. It's not a good for neighborhood livability.
Right.
We are joined tonight by Chair of Multnomah County, Jessica Vega-Peterson. Mike said, and you heard, that he doesn't feel like city and county leadership is acting like there's a true emergency. As the leader of the county, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, we are absolutely in a state where everybody has to be responding with all of the urgency possible. And I think one of the biggest ways that you see that is in the ways that the city and the county are working together in a partnership that you haven't seen in years. And I think that that is the most important thing, so that we have the county who is responding to our behavioral health crisis. We are, working with the city to get resources for people who are experiencing homelessness. And we are going to focus on building those systems up. We want to make sure then that our partners at the city can focus on the things that they are the best at when it's responding to criminal activity, when it's connecting people with resources. So absolutely, we are in a crisis, and I think we just have to keep doing the work that we've started in responding together.
Commissioner Renee Gonzalez, I want to step in and talk to you, and I want to scoot over in this way so we get a better shot of you. You walked around a portion of southeast Portland with me and a bunch of the neighbors as well. You had some concerns about what you saw out there, and you expressed concerns about livability. You talked about some low-level criminals not being held accountable and not enough police officers on the streets. Are things improving from your viewpoint?
It all depends on which metrics we're looking at. You know, gun violence is down this year. We've broke 800 in police officers sworn in the city of Portland for the first time in years. These are positive developments. We've added 500 shelter bed spaces at the city over the last 18 months. These are all positive directions. 911 wait time is actually down. It doesn't feel like it, but we're doing better this year versus last year. Having said that, the sense in the city of lawlessness, of chaos, is real, and I'm not sure we see. Until Portlanders are saying every day things are getting better, I'm not sure we're there yet. And even though 911 wait times have improved, police sometimes is going to take 23 minutes to respond to a high priority call. That's our average right now. That's way too long. That is a product of volume and number of police officers. And so we have a ton of work to do, and we needed to start it yesterday. But there are some areas that we are seeing improvement.
Sasha, I don't know if you raised your hand or not here in the back row. Did you raise your hand and it's improving the city?
No, I don't believe that it is.
Tell me, because you were also on that walk around with the commissioner a couple of weeks ago. You expressed concerns about the crime in your neighborhood, and especially involving your two young children.
Absolutely.
So tell me about whether you think things are going the right direction or not.
You know, like someone mentioned, there are a lot of things that may be happening behind the scenes that we're not privy to at this moment. So I can't agree with that at this point because I don't know. All I can speak of is what I experienced in my neighborhood. So what we talked about last time is the crime in my neighborhood, people experiencing houselessness on each side of Burnside, and I have seen that they are cleared out, but then the next week they return. So I feel like it's putting a Band-Aid on a problem and not really solving the issue.
Right.
Kim Thrasher, you raised your hand. You're doing work in Northwest Portland, in the Pearl District. You raised your hand that you think Portland is starting to improve or is improving. What makes you feel that way?
Well, from my perspective, when I look back a year ago, right, and I look at today where we're at, we really were struggling with responsiveness from the city, from the police department, et cetera, because we just don't have any police in the Pearl very much. And so we had to take it into our own hands. We had to create an organization, a nonprofit, to deal with that. And we had to deal with security, we had to deal with the homelessness and get them into shelters. But the most important thing we did to that responsiveness issue is we created a hotline. And now when a person has a problem, they get responded to within 8 minutes, and that problem gets dealt with by our professionals on the street, and they get triaged, whether it's a issue with humanitarian outreach or whether it's a security issue. The people take care of that problem. They help the person that's struggling with their issues, and I think it's really raised confidence that we can be responsive, but what we need to do is connect with the public resources to make them more responsive.
I want to bring in Multnomah County Commissioner Sharon Myron now, if we can. And you've expressed concerns in the past about not being enough being done at the county level to address drug use and mental health, things like that. When you're hearing all this stuff from these folks, what goes through your head?
Mike Roach pretty much echoed what I have been feeling. As an ER doctor, I have never heard the words crisis or emergency used so much, but with such little action as if there is urgency to what we need to be doing. And I've been finding it very distressing, frankly. I believe that we are in a true crisis when it's come to fentanyl and addiction in general, with mental health and mental illness, with the public safety issues a lot of this has been causing, with homelessness. I work on the front line with Portland Street Medicine. I go out to encampments, I see where people are, and it is dire, and I do not see what I've been saying forever, but I still do not see a plan, how there's any holistic approach to doing this. And to Sasha's comment, you don't see it on, you know, you're like, maybe there's something behind the scenes. Maybe there's something behind the scenes at the county, but I'm not seeing it.
Right.
We've got the chair. What progress would you point to, and can you detail the plan from your seat?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, we have started engaging with the city as we're talking about the ways that we're going to be working together and how we're actually going to be coordinating the work that's happening. I don't disagree that things had been broken for a very long time. The fact that we had the city who had to invest in their own safe rest villages, in their own task sites, because they weren't getting that partnership, they weren't getting that cooperation, that we had providers of those services having to have, you know, separate contracts with the city, with the county. All of that was signs of a broken system. What we're doing now is we're actually aligning the efforts that we have so that the work that is being done is more coordinated. The outreach that is happening is more engaged, that we're actually using data and using that to really track how is that outreach happening, what services are being connected with people, how are they moving into shelter, how are they moving into housing. All of that is going to help us measure our outcomes and see that visible difference. And I think that is something true. I live out in East Portland. We have been struggling with a lot of these issues a lot longer than other parts of the city. Those are very real. And I understand that until people see that difference in their own neighborhood, in their own block, they're not going to believe it. But there is a commitment in working together that we haven't had before. And we actually have folks from the city and the county sitting at the table talking about what is our strategy for shelter? What is our strategy for data going to be? How are we going to be leveraging the strengths that each of us have? And that's something very positive.
We're going to continue our discussion after the break, and we're going to talk about crime and public safety. What's it going to take to get people to go back downtown Portland again and feel safe about it after this? Welcome back to our town hall. City and crisis problems to progress. We've talked about some of the problems. We'll do more of that. But what's it going to take to get you and your family to feel safe in the city, in the county again? That's part of our discussion tonight.
And we're going to start right here with Lieutenant Ken Dulio with the Portland Police Bureau. Lieutenant Dulio, you've heard it some here tonight. We hear it a lot in the community that people want to see police, but they also want to have police respond when they call 911. You've mentioned to me before that staffing continues to be one of the Bureau's biggest struggles right now. Where do you things stand from your seat?
Well, first I want to say the staffing we have, we're all in. We're not going to make staffing an issue as far as making an excuse. But I would say I appreciated what Commissioner Gonzalez was talking about earlier. I believe if Portland is right size to comparable cities our size with their police force, we'd be at about 1,200 police officers. And I think a lot of these crime issues and livability issues, most of them go away or get drastically reduced.
I'm going to bring in Ann McMullen now, and you were also part of our walk around Southeast Portland that day. I know you've had a lot of concerns, certainly in the city. Tell me about as we talk in this segment about people feeling more comfortable in this town, what would make you more comfortable?
That's a tough question. Well, I think what people want to see is traction on some of these issues. The graffiti, the trash, the unfortunate homeless situation that we have. It's challenging and it's soul-sucking where Sasha and I live. It's an everyday occurrence. Making that decision, do I step over this person? Do I check to see if they're breathing? Do I call PSR? Who do I call? And it's a depressing, and you end up in this bubble. And I would like to also say, though, we've been working with an organization called PIMO within the city. We do a problem-solving meeting every other week with those folks, and they have been tremendous in helping us start to find some creative solutions almost immediately with that sense of urgency that we're not getting from traditional agencies, and they've been a godsend. So I think people in our government agencies need to start thinking creatively and no more excuses. We know everybody has staffing issues. We need to get beyond that and think of creative solutions, think outside the box, and be innovative.
Let me ask the Commissioner this. Creative solutions is what they're calling for. You agree with that?
I do, but there's also some fundamentals. You know, if someone's committing a crime, they need to face repercussions. And if someone's suffering from substance use disorder, we need to get them into treatment. Sometimes we need to compel them to enroll in treatment. And sometimes courts are the best mechanism to assure that happens. You either face jail time or you get yourself into addiction services. So there's some things about operating a city that we've known a long time. They're basic, they're fundamental. You need help and public safety shows up, and if someone does you harm, they face repercussions. And so there are other things that I think we're going to continue to innovate. We continue to evaluate the best responder for a particular type of call. We continue to evaluate how we're leveraging technology in both in the criminal justice system as well as how we just triage calls in the system. So there's innovation around the edges, but there are some fundamentals of how a city operates that we cannot forget. And sometimes in the criminal justice system, we've tried to embrace the new and the creative at the expense of time and tested solutions to crime. And I think we need to get back to some of those.
Sharon, you're shaking your head up and down over here quite a bit. So I got to get you involved quickly. What is it you agree with over here?
No, I absolutely agree with Commissioner Gonzalez that there are some things that we just know and we can and should be doing, and so how do we get those things out there to people? We know what's effective, we know what works, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel every minute. Let's do some of those time-tested things. I recently attended a national sobering collaborative, a summit that talked about sobering centers. They have done all kinds of things across the country in this regard. I've been saying for years that we need a sobering center. And so we don't need to go through the whole process again of figuring out what we need. We know what we need. Let's just do it, to coin a phrase.
Right.
I want to bring in Lionel Irving here. You hear some of these residents in East Portland talk about public safety. You do a lot of work in East Portland when it comes to gun violence. What more do you feel like you need from the city? And tell us a little bit about the work you do.
Well, I think that we put a lot of onus on the city and the county, and it's really the community members that we need to step up. You know, I think that's the real biggest missing piece in this whole equation. Is a lot of community members looking for the elected officials to come and solve the problems, but the community is where the real power is at. So that's what would make me feel more comfortable, is have more active community members getting involved into solutions instead of just, you know, whining, for lack of better words.
Michael Johnson, I want to bring you in here. You lost your son this summer in a shooting. What do you think of what you've heard so far?
Well, one of the things is that when I hear what makes better, this is my concern. Well, we need to pay the defenders so we can get people in court. If you don't get those folks paid, then nothing's going to work when it comes to the criminal system. And then as we speak about the police department, yes, we want to grow the police department bigger, better, but it has to start also with training, which is the last thing on their list when it comes to hiring more police officers. So when you fix the training part, because we don't want folks coming out saying defund the police department, we want folks to come out and cheer the police department. We want criminals to answer those crimes, and so the only way they could be in court is you have public defenders. Right now they're getting out after 15 days, 30 days, and so that's a big piece right there in itself, because criminals know that they can walk away and then go right back and do the fentanyls, the drugs that are on the streets, and then, you know, disrespect our officers at the same time. And they're working hard. So I think those pieces right there alone would show immediate change. But you got to get the folks paid that are doing the work in the courtroom.
Yeah. So important we hear from so many of these neighbors, because the neighborhoods are really crucial to what happens going forward. We know that. Jennifer Danluck, the owner of Ross Island Grocery and Cafe, you've been involved in a lot of discussions over the years, certainly talking about what needs to happen, what needs to improve, and so on. Tell me your thoughts as you're listening to this.
Well, I just wanted to remind people, I sit on the South Portland Neighborhood Association. I'm a liaison to the South Portland Business Association, and there really should be a way for the city to engage the neighborhood associations, reach out to them, and rely on them. We have a team of very, very intelligent, dedicated volunteers, and with deep history of the neighborhoods and the problems. We could help implement solutions, and we could give you suggestions if you want, so that there's kind of a checklist to go on.
And that was something that we talked about in our roundtable as well, Mike Roach. Remember that? You guys were concerned that perhaps the voice of the neighbor was going away a little bit. You feel that?
Neighbors have a lot to offer. Lionel said it. Citizens are an untapped resource that the city has not found a way to really engage in solving our current crisis, our emergency. And I think it's really important that we come up with some ways to do that. What those are going to be, I'm not sure. There's some structures around, but there needs to be more structure, because it's an untapped resource that we can't afford to not use in this emergency.
Real quick, before we go to break, Chair, when you hear that, what can the county do to engage these neighbors more?
Yeah, so I actually got my start in community involvement being on the Hazelwood Neighborhood Association. I was on the Hazelwood Neighborhood Association for 6 years, and really, like, we knew best what was happening in our community and what kind of engagement and response and resources we needed. So I think that's a fantastic idea. I mean, I will say that the neighborhood associations are actually part of the city of Portland's government, so there should be a direct pipeline into the city. And I think that, like, when I was a county commissioner, for instance, I made a point to visit every single one of the neighborhood associations. So I agree with you 100%.
We'll be right back to continue this conversation after a quick break.
Welcome back to our City in Crisis Town Hall, everybody. So far, we've talked about some of the issues facing the city. There are many, but we also learned that about 3/4 of this audience feels that we are making some progress. And coming up, we'll take a look at some neighborhoods that are banding together to solve problems. And we'll look at some of the future solutions, what will finally turn things around. That and much more still to come. Welcome back to our town hall, everybody. We are talking at this point neighborhood livability. Do folks feel safe out there? If not, what needs to be done? I want to go back and talk to Sasha Sterling Smith in the back row back here, because Sasha, you were in my documentary that I put together in the City in Crisis, and you had concerns at that point about your children and whether it was livable for them. Tell me your thoughts on this.
I just explained that I have two little kids, 5 and 7, and we talked about just my neighborhood being able to go on walks. It's not simple, right? It's not safe for them. We talked about how I would find needles and having to explain what that is on the ground or why is it there, or seeing the foil, the burnt foil, explaining what that is. I have a son who loves to pick things up from the floor and pick flowers, and being able to say, no, don't touch that, scaring him not to do so because of the conditions of my neighborhood. And Steve, I failed to mention that my thoughts are mine, not my employers. I failed to mention that piece. And then another thing, you also, just to go back to something you mentioned, what would make me comfortable. Mm-hmm. As a mom, as a community member, what would make me comfortable is seeing or hearing about tangible ways that we can support those that are experiencing houselessness, right? Because Ann mentioned a comment, respectfully, Commissioner said, I agree, but, so it kind of negates the comment that was made. And I also feel that we're treating every single person experiencing houselessness as criminals, and that's not necessarily true, because depending on where you come from, that could be me, one paycheck away from being on the streets, right? So if I do something that isn't in agreement with the government or policymakers, then I'm fined, I'm sent to jail. And my question to that is, what does that solve? Because we're criminalizing folks whose crime is they can't afford a home or can't afford food. And I don't think that's right. So for you mentioned my neighborhood, I would feel that clearing the neighborhood and not just knowing that they're going to be put the street over or another neighborhood, but actually having a plan to house them. What are we going to do to solve the problem? Not just bringing more law enforcement so they can patrol those that are in crisis, right? But actually having resources that they can tap into, because as we all know, it's not just about houselessness. There are folks who are experiencing mental health crises, right? And law enforcement, they're not necessarily trained to deal with that as a mental health person would. So I think it's just a combination of so much, but that is what would make me feel more comfortable, knowing that we are doing something to actually help people because we are a community, right? And it's about humanity and not just throwing them aside or putting them in jail for whatever reason.
Okay, Commissioner Gonzalez, I want to ask you that. I hate to put this all on your shoulders, of course, but she talks about a lot going on out there, no question about it. How do you respond to her concerns?
Well, I think we got to start with, when we talk about the unsheltered population, this is a highly segmented population. So we have those that are economically displaced. We have those that are struggling with real behavioral health issues, whether it's mental illness or substance use disorder. We also have some migratory elements that choose to sleep outside. And all of those things can be true at the same time. And so what are the solutions to these different pieces? Well, it's not the same for each of those segments. There are, and then what gets more complicated is at the city level, we are the first responders, right? We are the ones you call when there is a problem on your street. We are not the solution for behavioral health. We rely on our public partners, whether at the county or at the state, to provide those services. So I wholeheartedly agree with the point that there are a number of folks on the street that the criminal justice system is not the solution to their problem. Where we wrestle as the city, though, we are responsible to citizens, and they see constant problems on their streets. They're looking to us for immediate relief to that. We do what we can within our boxes, and then we have to partner with our teammates elsewhere in the public sector for the long-term solutions. And last but not least, we do have a responsibility as a city to make sure we're building enough affordable housing in the city. That is a vexing, challenging problem. It's not unique to the city of Portland, but that is also one part that is squarely in our area. Are we doing enough to create enough affordable housing in the region? It's not going to fix it for everyone on our streets, and I want to be crystal clear on that. If they have serious behavioral health issues or they're choosing to be there, building housing is not going to solve that problem for those segments, but it is an important factor for what many of the stress that many are feeling on the streets.
Right.
Let's turn to Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson. We've heard that nuanced response. When you hear what Sasha says and Commissioner Gonzalez say, what would you like to add?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I wanted to build on is what you had talked about, like people who are in severe behavioral health, whether it's addiction or whether it's a mental illness, they won't be successful if they're just put into housing without any supports. And one of the things that we severely lack, not just in the city of Portland or Multnomah County, but across the state, are the behavioral health resources for people who have the highest levels of acuity, right? And so, and I'm looking over at my friend from Central City Concern, who is talking about like people even who are working with providers who have decades of experience in this, the level of acuity that we're seeing on the streets is so intense that we need to be building those resources, and this can't just be a local effort. It has to be, we need our state partners, we need our federal partners, we need to be leveraging Medicaid investments. We have to be building out the resources to help people who are in the most acute situation so that they can become healthier and then they can become successful long-term in housing, so that then we're creating a pathway from living unsheltered to getting connected to resources, to getting more stability, to finally getting into a permanent supportive housing. So we have to have that continuum, and that is really the crucial work that we have at the county, with our partners at the state, with the federal government in front of us.
Juliana Lukasik, she mentioned you from Central City Concerns, so I figure I'll give you a shot at this. But I know you've said that you think it's important and impressive that finally the state and the county and the city are all finally working together on this. Does that give you some solace a little bit?
It really does. I mean, I think somebody over there mentioned for the first time, I think it was our officer, that we're seeing them all working together. They're trying to come up with a plan. And to the point that is being made, we're doing work at Central City Concern in conjunction with Care Oregon and HealthShare to do population health data research. And we're pulling together a lot of data that shows the size and scale of the problem, and it clearly demonstrates that we need more residential treatment beds, right? We need places for people who are acutely ill to be before they enter Central City Concerns continuum. So what we're experiencing is a mismatch in services. Folks that are really sick are coming into our facilities and their outcomes are decreasing. Their quality of their outcomes is decreasing because there's a mismatch in service. So we 100% need more residential treatment beds for folks who are really, really sick right now. The drugs that we're seeing on the streets are so dangerous and so potent, and they're causing psychosis at levels we have never seen before. And we really need those. It's an urgent emergency for us to have more residential treatment beds.
I got about 30 seconds left in this break right here. I want to go back to you, Sasha, just quickly, because we started with you. After what you've heard now from the commissioner and these other folks, you feel a little bit better that we're heading in the right direction?
Steve. I'm hopeful that we are headed in the right direction. I think we need to continue the conversation about resources and what the future should look like. And not just from our perspective, but actually going and speaking to those who are affected.
We'll be right back to continue this conversation.
Welcome back to our town hall, everybody. It's time to really start nailing down on some solutions, some thoughts about how we move the city and county forward to make everybody feel better about where we're headed. We have lots of ideas here, I promise you that. We're going to begin with right over in the corner.
We're going to start with Frank Moscow, the founder of Adopt One Block. You're also on the governor's task force looking at downtown Portland. What are some ideas, solutions you have?
So a lot of the things we used to do that we just don't do anymore that actually worked. The city of Portland has a grand total of one functioning street sweeper. It used to be that was one of the ways in which the city took care of the city and cleaned up the city, and now we have a grand total of one. That isn't new, that isn't innovative, that is just doing something that we used to do that worked. A second item in the things that we used to do that worked is that for most residences in Portland, there is one trash can pickup every 2 weeks. In all of the surrounding neighborhoods or communities in Portland and in most cities across the United States, it's one trash can every week. Metro used to prosecute illegal dumping and graffiti, and because there really hasn't been any of that, everybody knows that you can dump with impunity, and you can dump it anywhere you want, and there is absolutely no chance you are going to get caught. There's no chance you're going to get fined. We have essentially made it easy, free, and without fear of penalty to do the wrong thing. So if you make it easy, free, and without fear of penalty to do the wrong thing, we shouldn't be surprised by what we see on the streets. Another example that is done in hundreds of jurisdictions around the country is that most people can leave things that they don't want once a quarter, 2 or 3 times a year at the curb, and the Department of Sanitation or the trash hauler will pick it up. We don't do that here. That isn't new, that isn't innovative. Hundreds of municipalities do that as a way to make sure that their streets are consistently clean. And for whatever reason, we're not doing that here. Those are very concrete, actionable items. They don't cost a lot of money. They can be implemented fast. They are solutions that have proven to work here and in other parts of the country, and we strongly suggest that we start doing them here.
I want to bring in Lance Randall here, and you are also in the governor's task force. I know you love this community greatly. You listen to this discussion here. What do you think needs to be done to move us forward?
Well, let me first say I think that the city of Portland and some other cities around the country have voluntarily taken on a burden on behalf of other cities around the country. the question that I've always asked is, how many people who we see on the streets where all these things are going on, how many of them are actually from the community? And we're talking about community, and the city is a big community, but I think you have people who have come here because they see that we're trying to solve some problems, but it's for our community here in Portland, but people keep pouring in, and I'm wondering at what point are we being taken advantage of? And I would like for our elected officials to really take a look at that, and the best way to take a look at it is through some basic data. Let's really hit the streets before we start investing millions and millions of dollars in certain solutions. We have to find out who exactly are we dealing with. Where are they from? You know, there's a lot of different things we need to evaluate so we can come up with a strategic approach to try to address this issue. But I think what we're doing, we're throwing a lot of dollars at it, but do we really know the people we're trying to serve, and do we know where they're from? Because I feel if they're not really vested in the city of Portland, other than to be here to take advantage of the services that we're kindly putting out to help people who are experiencing things. Because I've gone to different places and I say, wow, they don't have any people on the street. I don't see the trash. What is the situation? Then I say, I wonder how many of them left here and came to Portland because we are trying to really help. So I think we got to take a step back and be very strategic about really finding out and understanding what we're dealing with. Now, real quick on public safety, I will say this. I thought it was a terrible notion to talk about defunding the police. And I've always said that black people need police protection as well. And it seems as though that this was all about, people made it seem as though this actually came out of our community, but it really didn't. We value our police officers and protection. We want to be protected. And then I always said, what is the trade-off if we take away police protection in our community by reducing the police department? So now we're in a big mess. I will say, yes, COVID attributed to it. The response to George Floyd contributed to a lot of different things. But I think we really have to dig deep down into the data, the reason for these problems, before we start just throwing money at it because it's not working.
Thank you. Right?
Chair, do you have concerns, as Lance said, that people are taking advantage of the resources?
You know we have about 8,000 people who are experiencing homelessness here in Multnomah County, and that's about 5,000 people who are unsheltered. There's about 3,000 people who have some kind of shelter. That's the population that we have today. So when I'm thinking about the system that we have to build and the services that we need to provide, it's about that. We also have to be looking at how we are investing in prevention to stop the flow of people from experiencing homelessness, whether that is coming from our foster care system, whether that's coming from some kind of corrections. But where I absolutely agree with you is the need for data. In fact, I just had a meeting earlier today with Gartner, who's working with our data systems folks at the county to take a look at our current way of gathering data, using data, and really looking at what is the system we need. For the first time, Multnomah County actually has the administrative access for our homelessness information system. It was part of the city for a long time. We have it. So now we have this opportunity to really be making investments in our data systems to find out who's here, find out what services they're using, find out if they're being effective, and really track how our system is working. And I think that's something that's a really important thing.
Okay, Sharon Myron, I know you're taking notes furiously over here. So
I know, I'm compulsive.
We have about 2 minutes left before break, so go ahead.
I just want to comment on the idea that we know that we have 8,000 people. We don't. That's the problem, is that we say we do, we may even think that we do, but what we are counting, that is not the number of people we have. And even Housing Multnomah now, the plan to get people off the street into housing that has so far failed, but hopefully will recover, is saying we had no idea what these people needed because they're not in the system, they're off the grid. What we need to do is assertively, aggressively, proactively put people out there to count and understand who's living outside, because the numbers we have right now, those are just these long, more than 2 minutes. But we need to do what's called Build for Zero in a real way. People to count, understand barriers and needs so we can invest our limited resources where they will be most effective for people.
Right.
I'm going to turn to Mike Thielen and Randy Miller here. A lot of the conversation does revolve around getting downtown Portland back to where it used to be. You guys are doing that with your Reimagine Portland group. What's some of the work you're doing?
Well, I think, for me, speaking for myself, I've spent my entire career bringing people together, bringing community together. You couldn't do that in a pandemic, and then after the pandemic, I think a lot of us just felt siloed. And it felt like democracy and civics was a spectator sport. We didn't feel like we were part of it. And the more we talked to others, the more others felt the same way. So speaking for myself, Reimagining Portland was bringing together people that hadn't connected in a long time, emerging leaders in the city, creative leaders in the city, people who work for organizations like Wyden and Kennedy, as well as people who work within city government and at many levels and county government as well. So, it's been really rewarding because there's good people on all sides of every organization. But, right now I feel the connective tissue, the fascia of Portland is really what needs to be repaired. The intelligence are here. Certainly we have the money and resources. We just need to do a better job connecting people in proactive, smart ways. And we're trying to do our part.
Randy, what are some ideas real quickly that have come out of that?
Well, actually part of it goes back to the 70s and early 80s. And I was a participant in this thing. This is when Mayor Goldschmidt was mayor. And at that particular time, against all entrenched interests, the city of Portland, through their public policy people and their urban planners, cooperated with a lot of private sector. A lot of us guys are running around out in the city. And in that period of time, we were able to develop Pioneer Square, Performing Arts Center, closure of Harbor Drive, starting the light rail, stopping the Mount Hood Freeway, all that stuff that was able to be done because we had the engagement between the city staffers, the leadership, and also those of us that were out there in the private sector. And I'm thinking, we're known as a community. I mean, this is not an opinion, it's a fact. We have one of the highest levels of civic engagement of any city in the United States. It's been evidenced just by the remarks here. And by bringing people together again, like what we're doing, and these that Mike and I have been able to assemble are so passionate about this place, and it's their future, not ours. It's theirs because of their young age group, and they really want to participate. So we're coming together with projects, and we're going to develop something that we can work with the city, the
Mike,
county,
we got to go to
others
break
as well.
Thank
All
you.
right?
Unfortunately, because you're on a good roll there, but we'll continue our discussion after this.
Thanks for joining us tonight. We've heard so much about what needs to be done to restore Portland and the surrounding area. It seems like a lot of it comes back to that public-private partnership working together.
Absolutely does. Thank you all for coming here. Really, I'm not sure we solved all the problems, but I'll tell you something right now. The important thing is we talk about it, right? We have to do that before any solutions take place. I know you all had a lot going on in your lives, so thank you for coming in. We'll continue this discussion as well. And don't forget, folks, all of our documentaries are at KATU.com. And check this out. Do you think Portland is improving? Well, 19% say just starting. So you got to start somewhere, right? Thank you for watching, folks, everybody. Good night.
Have a good night.